that noise? Can't get up. Is this quicksand? Am I having a bad dream? Oh my goodness. Oh. What's that noise? Oh my goodness. I was dreaming I was being chased by bandits. They were just about ready to bring the scimitar down on my head and lop it from my shoulders. Oh my goodness. I was dreaming I was going to get kicked to death by 3 camels. Oh my goodness, those are bad dreams. There must have been something funny in that water I drank from that Oasis. I lodged a formal complaint, but I haven't heard anything back yet. My goodness, I swear I thought that was quicksand. Whew, those musicians got me scared. Alrighty, well, now that I've realized that this is reality and not some sort of strange dream or figment of my imagination, I guess I better get back to business. Musicians, quit making that racket. Stop it. Yeah, they knew. Yeah, they know who's in charge. They know who's in charge, and that is moi. Because I'm a prince. Prince of the Oasis. All right. Enough goofing around. I said if you gave me an Oasis and saved me, I'd teach a couple TOK lessons. Look at that poofy hat. You guys are jealous. Yeah. It's not very good in the hot sun, though. I'll tell you that. All right. So let's get back to it. I'm going to continue talking about things and stuff. There we go. Subjectivity. Whoa. You see what's there on that screen? Yep. You're like, no, not really. Okay, well, the good thing it's going to be right there. Whoa. Okay. No, you see it. It's time machine. Time machine. Why do I have a time machine up there? Well, because I like time machines in science fiction. I'm a complete nerd. That might be it, but I actually have a point. The reason that I have a time machine up there is because that might be the only way that we could ever get a real view of how history looked. To go back in time. Now, we wouldn't actually get a real view anyway, because you know why? Because then we only see it from our own perspective. You don't see all of it. You see whatever it is that you happen to be looking at in any particular time. If you think about this, we like to think of photographs as being objective first account sources. They are not objective first account sources, because why did the person take the picture of just that? And what was happening over here and over here from just that? Why did that get that person's attention? And you know, there's famous examples of photography being faked, kind of like, you know, the famous one when they're on, I think, Iwo Jima, and they're raising the flag, that famous soldier one. Well, that wasn't even, that was staged. That famous picture was staged. Something like that happened with a much smaller flag, without a photographer there and all that kind of stuff. That actually happened. And then the photographer, I can't remember his name straight offhand, but the photographer thought that looked so good that he wanted to take a picture, so he got some other soldiers and a bigger flag and they stuck it up on top of that hill. It was completely fake. I mean, the whole thing happened earlier, but still, you guys see what I mean. Anyway, subjectivity. So, subjectivity is an inherent and inescapable part of science. No, science, well, that too, kind of. Well, it's not inescapable, but of history. And so, even if we were to go back in time, you're still going to have nothing but subjective truths that you're finding. Okay, so, but let's take a look at this now. And this is, whoops, I still have the technology. Even in the desert. Even in the desert. Whoops. Even at an oasis. I've got the power. There is subjective interpretation at every level of history. Every level of history is subjective interpretation. First-hand accounts, second-hand accounts, multiple other accounts, multiple accounts. Always going to be subjectivity. The historian is not an objective observer. This is so important for you to remember. You're not an objective observer. You're a subjective observer. And you play an active role in the creation of knowledge claims that you make. If you're a historian, the knowledge claims you're making, you are playing an active role. And generally you have a hypothesis that you're trying to support, so you find things that support a hypothesis and then you perpetuate the claim. And maybe people agree with you, maybe they don't, but that's not really the point. The point is you as a historian are part of the creation of the knowledge. You can make the argument that you're not really part of the creation, the event happening in science. You can make that argument, although you put the experiment together, but still. It would have happened anyway without you, that's the kind of thing. But historical knowledge claims don't happen without you, without a historian. The historian's entire personality and all of his knowledge, all of his morals and values are interconnected with how he portrays history. All of them. The things that you choose to look at in the first place. The opinions that you have about stuff. And here's the thing, and this is kind of a maxime, I guess you will, or something, a TOK maxime, if there is such a silly thing. That subjectivity is a two-edged sword, but helps the historian understand, but at the same time it masks him from fully understanding things from more perspectives than his own. And it's the constant battle on searching for knowledge, in any area of knowledge. How do we get out of the subjective and into the objective? Is there even objective truth in history? And I mean, you can make the claim and the argument that there is at least an objective truth in science, right? Math, correct, to a certain extent in human science. Maybe not in art, you know. But anyway, so that's kind of the point. And so there's three types of subjectivity. There's probably more. But there's three particular types of subjectivity that are important for this lesson. Subjectivity of a historian writing today, subjectivity of the primary source, and subjectivity of secondary sources. Now, the primary source obviously is the person who was at the event. If you remember, when it was the spring, I gave you guys a reading. And the reading was a guy named Raymond d'Aguirre or something. I probably just destroyed his name. But anyway, French, he was one of the Franks. And they marched down to Antiochia, you know, killing all kinds of people along the way. But they marched down there and they besieged the city and they eventually took it over. And he's writing of the situation and he's writing back to his wife. I think he ended up dying somewhere along the way. He apparently never came home and the letters stopped. But anyway, so, and then we looked at, I can't remember his name right offhand, but I'll put it in there. But we looked at, I'll put it in when I do the editing. We looked at a Muslim secondary source, and it was quite different, very different. Talked about different details, talked about all kinds of different things. And then later when we talk about, like for instance, when historians today throw things together about that, they kind of mix everything together. And so those are all three levels of subjectivity. And so, anyway, okay? That's a picture of that. And Antiochia will come right up right now. Look at that. Whoops, big guy in the way. So there it is. You know, you see the flags and stuff and they're besieging it. That's actually a famous painting. Okay? But so that's kind of what we were talking about. Okay, and so here's the question. This is primary sources, secondary sources of all historians that have written about things. And some people call it the massacre at Antioch. If you don't remember, the Franks came in there and they killed everyone, pretty much, all of them, everybody, except for the Christians. Any Muslim in the place, they just slaughtered them. And they'd been besieging the city for a very, very long time, I think 10 or 11 months. And they were starving, they'd eaten their horses, and there are even accounts of, mostly if not completely by Muslim scholars, there are accounts that the Crusaders actually ate the people after they killed them because they were so hungry. And so, you know, I'm not sure if that's true, nobody does, but it was definitely a massacre. Anyway, so when the accounts of history contradict one another, who do we believe? And this is a very, very good question. Who do we believe when the accounts contradict one another? The answer very much depends on the bias one has. Subsequently, any knowledge known depends also on bias. Right? We can assume that the saying held true through ages, that the saying has held true through the ages this affects what we know about the past. What I mean by that is we can assume that human beings have always been subjective. There's no reason to assume that they haven't been subjective, and they haven't been biased, and they haven't been, trying to use propaganda to promote an idea. And the stuff we read is very much influenced by that. So we can make this assumption, and this is the kind of thing that you do with OPVCL. I think that's it. You guys know what I mean, but like I said, I'll put it will already have been on that one. I'll put it up here again. But anyway, so, okay, understanding of truth is a subjective understanding. There are many truths. You can make the argument there's only one truth. I mean, you can. So whatever happened, happened. All right? That happened. That happened. But the thing is we can't access that. And all we can access are the versions of that, or the recordings of that, or the sort of interpretations of that. That's all we are privy to. We don't have a time machine. I can't beam back to Antioquia and view it. There's no way. All I have is the few things that happened, or that, and this is with any event. Some events we have more recordings and more documentation, like when we're further in time, like, let's say Vietnam War or something like that. But still in Vietnam, it's called the American War, or the war against the Americans to save the country. We still call it the Vietnam War. When I was in Vietnam, I didn't go, unfortunately, but it just didn't work out that day. But anyway, there's a museum called the Museum of American War Crimes. Think about that for a second. What does that tell you? What does that tell the people there? What is that version of history? The Museum of American War Crimes. Okay. And it's very interesting. Well, I went to a place called Co Chi Tunnels there. I'll just give you an example of the subjectivity. I went to a place called Co Chi Tunnels, and okay, America, the United States lost that war. Vietnam is a communist government. The communists won, and the American side lost. So we left, which you guys know. Okay, some people say it wasn't really a loss. Well, if we were trying to defeat communism, we failed in that because communists still run the country. And Saigon is now called Ho Chi Minh City, for instance, when you're in Vietnam. And so when I went to this thing called Co Chi Tunnels, and Co Chi Tunnels was a place where a lot of battles took place. There's like burned out tank there and stuff like that, and but a lot of battles. And they had tunnels all over the place. They had bunkers, like multi-story bunkers under the ground. And I was in the tunnels. It was very, very cool. If you ever go, you got to go. But the Vietnamese are a lot smaller than this bulky guy. And so I tried to jump through one of their little trap holes things, and it looked like Winnie Pooh stuck in the ground. And the Americans, generally they were bigger and they couldn't get into the tunnels, and it was part of the reasons. But anyway, before we went around in the area, we watched a video, and a video was a video that was played for. I'll see if I can find that video. I might be able to. I'm not sure though. But anyway, the video was played for tourists, and it was showing old footage of this girl who was probably 17. I think she was 17, or 16 or something, and she had been decorated as a very efficient American killer. She had 17 confirmed kills on Americans. And you think about this is interesting. You don't ever hear that kind of stuff over here. But for them, she was a hero. She was being decorated. And it's talking about how if this young farm girl can, help defeat the unholy empire, then you can too. It was kind of a propaganda video. But this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Even something when there's footage, all right? Even something when we have film and documentation and whatever. Even then, it's still all about understanding of the truth as a subjective. There are many truths. There are many truths. That's no doubt a truth. The American version is a truth. Because truth does not necessarily mean true. If that makes any sense. It's kind of like the question of uncertainty that's going on right now, but it also ties into the faith question. But we'll get into that. And so those are some of the ideas with that. And like I said, I will do my very best when I edit this video. I'll do my very best to link it in there. It's a really cool video. It's very interesting. But the whole sort of subjectivity thing is very, you guys got to travel. Got to travel. But anyway, okay. So that's kind of the idea with the subjectivity lesson, and I'm going to do one other kind of a short one, and this one is focused primarily on knowledge construction through induction and deduction. And we didn't do this one in the spring, so this is kind of new altogether. But it's short. I'm just going to take a few minutes to go through the ideas here. And remember, induction is this: making predictions or assumptions about future events based on past experiences. Wait a second, how can you use induction in history? How can you use induction in history? Because history is about the past. Well, okay, let's take a look. Induction is crucial in the development of a hypothesis that historians later try to support. What I mean by this, the reason I had Machu Picchu up there, and now it's going to go, watch this, I can draw it with my finger, and it goes, whoop, up. It's kind of interesting to have those powers. This is a magical oasis. But anyway, if you take a look at Machu Picchu up there now, I mean, you see it's built on top of the hill, and it's really hard to get up there. And so people are trying, it's kind of a mystery. I mean, people obviously knew about it before, then a guy named Hiram Bingham kind of stumbled upon it again when he was walking around. Other people know it, but they credit him with the discovery of something which people knew about. But that's just a sort of very Western sort of thought process. I discovered this thing that, yeah, whatever. Okay, but anyway, so they have a whole bunch of sort of theories. So what was it for? Who lived there? Why did people leave? What happened? Why was it gone? I mean, why did they build it? Why did they go through such a headache to build that thing? So people create hypotheses. And I'll give you an example of the type of hypotheses. One of the things people say of why they built it there is because this empire, they knew who the empire was, but why they built it there was because it was a good defensive position. Okay? A good defensive position that nobody could get up there. Well, hardly anybody can get up there, not even themselves. It's really, really hard to get up there. I mean, before their cars. And so they all had, they had to build this stuff and bring stuff up the mountains and things like that. And so they're like, this is a real endeavor, so why would people build this thing? So then what they do is they look at the past. In the past, why did we build things like that? Well, we built things like that as fortresses to defend things, to make a defensive position. So you see what I mean? From the past, we understand things. So therefore, we make a prediction that in the future, I will be able to prove the hypothesis that this was a defensive place. Okay. That's the idea. Why did everybody die? Old people died here quickly. They were gone. They left quickly. They left over a very, very short period of time. So people think to themselves, well, why has that happened before in the past? Natural disaster. Well, it doesn't look like a natural disaster since it's kind of still there. I mean, it's just fallen down. Things haven't crumbled it and crushed it. So, no, we couldn't support that prediction. What else? Warfare? Well, there's not, everybody's gone. They're not like, there's nothing to support the warfare hypothesis. Disease? Okay. Maybe they did find some people with syphilis up there, but they didn't find, some bones and they had syphilic pulluses. And so they said, well, maybe something like that. But the thing is that they're using induction based on the past, making predictions about a future proof of a hypothesis. So far, they don't really know. Nobody really has a good theory because they haven't had enough evidence to support this claim. Okay? So there's different theories. You guys can look them up if you're interested. It's kind of a cool story about how they're trying to figure out what Machu Picchu is about. Now it's just a bunch of people that go in there in buses. I guess yeah. Anyway, okay. They're trying to limit really trying to limit it's going to be easy with COVID, but they're really trying to limit the tourism up there because it's kind of destroying the area like tourism does. People throwing their garbage around and stuff. If you're ever going to be a tourist, pick your garbage up. Yeah. Anyway, so induction is So induction is an invaluable tool for the historian. At the same time, induction carries with a significant risk. Because if your hypothesis is based on the past, and the thing you're trying to figure out has nothing to do with those past examples, then you're lost. Then you can't even think of a hypothesis. So if it's not natural disaster, if it's not, starvation, if it's not warfare, if it's not some sort of illness, what can it possibly be? People just said, hey, I'm tired of living here, let's move. Tired of walking up this darn hill. And so who knows? But that's the kind of idea with induction. The historian runs the risk of basing her assumptions about one historical phenomenon on the causes of another she is familiar with. If that makes any sense, it's kind of what I'm just saying. And if it's not there, then you're looking up the wrong, you're barking up the wrong tree, to use a dog metaphor. Woof. Okay? This will affect the knowledge claims, obviously. And deduction. Deduction is making conclusions based on premises we know to be true. We know that already. I've pounded that into your head from the very beginning, like the second lesson or something. Deduction is a very effective tool as long as the premises are known to be true. However, deduction can cause problems and conclusions if the conclusions based on premises only believed to be true. Kind of like the thing I did last lesson with the microcephalic skulls. All right? They believe it to be true, perhaps. So they're making assumptions based on that, or they're making conclusions based on that. So if your premises are true, if they're certainly true, then you're going to make a conclusion. But the problem with history is that, once again, how do we determine a true premise when everything is subjective and everything is based on interpretation? How do we determine the true premise? You can have science, but do science. You can't do science on everything. You can't do science on the claims of something. Okay? So, and like here in Machu Picchu, you can't do science on something which you don't have. I mean, they have the walls and stuff, they can date them, but as far as why everybody left, you can't do science on that. There's nothing to do science on. So science is a completely pointless tool in that sense. I mean, to solve that, really. Okay, so that was that. See, I said that was a short little one. We usually normally do things with it. And with that, this desert dweller is going to try to move on. I'm tired of being in this oasis. I can't stay here forever. The water's not very good. So off I go.